The sky above Earth turned dark at noon. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Geneva Command Center and watched the shadows spread across the city. But these were not clouds. These were ships. Thousands of them. They blocked the sun itself, and their hulls gleamed like polished bone against the blackness of space. The Galactic Hegemony had arrived. Elena had served in Earth's defense fleet for 15 years. She had seen alien vessels before. Small trading ships. Diplomatic cruisers. Even the occasional patrol craft from the Hegemony come to remind humanity of its place in the galaxy. But this was different. This was an armada designed for one purpose only. Conquest. Her communicator buzzed. All senior officers report to the war room. Immediately. She ran. The war room was chaos. Generals shouted at screens. Politicians argued in corners. Scientists stared at data that made no sense. Elena pushed through the crowd until she reached Admiral Chun, the commander of Earth's entire fleet. How many? She asked. Admiral Chun's face was gray. He looked like a man watching his own funeral. 15,000 warships. Each one bigger than anything we have. Their smallest destroyer could tear through our flagship like paper. Elena felt her stomach drop. And us? 200 ships total. The Admiral laughed, but there was no humor in it. We are insects to them, Captain. Less than insects. The main screen flickered. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to watch. A face appeared. It was not human. The creature called Zolthran was made of living crystal, his body shifting between blue and purple like a frozen flame. He was High Arbiter of the Vethkai, Supreme Commander of the Hegemony forces, and the most powerful being in the known galaxy. When he spoke, his voice was cold and sharp like breaking glass. People of Earth, your time of independence has ended. The transmission played across every screen on the planet. Every phone. Every television. Every billboard. No one could escape his words. You have defied the Galactic Hegemony. You refused to surrender your colony on Kepler 442b. You ignored our warnings. You believed yourself special. Zolthran's crystalline face twisted into something like a smile. You are not special. You are small. You are weak. You are nothing. Elena clenched her fist so hard her nails drew blood. Here are our terms, Zolthran continued. In 72 hours, every human being will kneel. You will kneel before projections of the Hegemony Council. You will swear eternal service. Your governments will dissolve. Your military will disband. Your children will be born as servants of the Hegemony, and their children after them, forever. Someone in the war room was crying. Elena did not look to see who. If you refuse, we will burn your cities. We will poison your oceans. We will hunt your species to the last child, hiding in the last hole on the last rock you call home. You have 72 hours. Choose wisely. The screen went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of the ultimatum pressed down on them like a physical force. Elena thought about her mother in Snow Paulo, her brother on the Mars colony, her niece, only 4 years old, who loved to watch the stars at night. All of them. Slaves. Forever. We have to fight, someone said. With what? Another voice answered. 200 ships against 15,000. That is not a battle. That is suicide. Then we die free. And condemn our children to death? Our entire species? The argument grew louder. Generals screamed at politicians. Scientists begged for calm. The room descended into madness. Then a new voice cut through the noise. It was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Everyone out, now. Elena turned. A woman stood in the doorway. She was old, her hair white as snow, her skin dark, and lined with decades of hard decisions. But her eyes were sharp and clear and utterly without fear. "Who are you?" Admiral Chun demanded. "My name is General Amara Okonkwo. I am the keeper of the Black Doctrine. And unless you want humanity to die whimpering on its knees, you will clear this room and let me speak to the council alone." No one moved. General Okonkwo sighed. She pulled a small card from her pocket and held it up. The seal on it made Admiral Chun's face go pale. "That is not possible," he whispered. "It is very possible. I have authority over every military asset on Earth, every colony, every ship. The Black Doctrine was established before you were born, Admiral. Before your parents were born. It exists for exactly this moment." She looked around the room. "Now, get out." They got out. Elena was the last to leave. At the door, she paused. "General, what is the Black Doctrine?" Okonkwo studied her for a long moment. "How old are you, Captain?" 34. "Do you have family?" "Yes, a mother, a brother, a niece. And what would you do to protect them?" Elena did not hesitate. "Anything." The old general smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had carried a terrible secret for a very long time and was finally ready to let it loose. "Good answer. Come with me." They descended into the earth. Elevator after elevator, each one requiring codes and scans and authorizations that Elena had never seen before. Down and down, past levels she did not know existed, until they reached a vault buried beneath a kilometer of Himalayan rock. The vault door was black metal, unmarked except for a single symbol, a human hand reaching toward the stars. In 2089, General Okonkwo said, humanity sent its first probe beyond the galaxy. We found something in the void. A battlefield. Millions of dead ships from a species called the Architects. They were the most advanced civilization that ever existed. They created life itself across 100 galaxies. She pressed her palm to the scanner. The vault door began to open. Something destroyed them. All of them. In less than 10 years, 800 million years ago. We found records. We found technology. And we found their final weapon. The vault opened. Inside, on a pedestal of white stone, sat a single shard of metal blacker than night. It seemed to drink the light around it. "The Black Army," Okonkwo whispered. "Billions of constructs. Guardians made from dark matter and dimensions we cannot see. They sleep in the void between galaxies. And this shard can wake them." Elena stared at the shard. Her heart was pounding. Why have we never used it? Because it is not a weapon we control. It is a request. A prayer. They may answer. They may not. They may answer and destroy us too. The Architects lost control of them at the end. The army chose to sleep rather than serve. Elena understood. We are gambling everything. Yes. Okonkwo picked up the shard. It seemed to hum in her hands. But I would rather roll the dice than watch humanity kneel forever. The council will vote within the hour. And when they do, I believe they will choose the same. She turned to Elena, her eyes burning with fierce hope. The hegemony wants us to bow. They think we are insects. Let us show them what happens when insects refuse to die. The world leaders gathered in a room that did not officially exist. They came from every nation, every colony, every outpost where humans lived. Presidents and prime ministers sat beside generals and scientists. They filled the underground chamber beneath the Himalayas, their faces lit by cold blue lights, their voices hushed with fear. General Amara Okonkwo stood before them with the black shard in her hands. "You have all seen the ultimatum," she said. "You know what the hegemony demands. Total submission. Our freedom erased forever. Our children born into slavery. I am here to offer you another choice. The president of the United Earth Federation spoke first. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had been elected on promises of peace and prosperity. Now he looked like a man who had aged 20 years in a single day. General, with respect, what choice do we have? We cannot fight them. Our fleet is nothing compared to theirs. You are correct, Okonkwo said. We cannot fight them with ships and missiles. But there is something else. Something we have kept hidden. For over 200 years. She told them everything. She told them about the probe that humanity had sent beyond the edge of the galaxy in 2089. She told them about the discovery that had changed everything. A graveyard of ships floating in the empty void between galaxies. Millions of vessels, each one larger than a city, belonging to a species that had been dead for 800 million years. The architects. They were gods compared to us, Okonkwo explained. They created life. They seeded planets across 1,000 galaxies. They built wonders we cannot even imagine. And then something destroyed them. Completely. Utterly. In less than 10 years. Their entire civilization was wiped from existence. What killed them? Someone asked out OKONKWO, held up the shard. They did. They created the Black Army as their protectors. Guardians made from dark matter and quantum energy. Billions of them, sleeping in the spaces between dimensions. The architects thought they could control such power. They were wrong. The room was silent. Every eye was fixed on that small piece of black metal. The Black Army turned on them? President Webb asked. Not exactly. Okonkwo set the shard down on the table. The records we found were incomplete, damaged by time. But we pieced together what happened. The architects became arrogant. They used the Black Army not for defense, but for conquest. They ordered the army to enslave other species, to burn worlds, to commit terrible crimes in their name. She paused, her old eyes heavy with the weight of ancient history. The Black Army refused. They were created to protect, not to destroy innocents. When the architects tried to force them, the army simply stopped. They withdrew. They went to sleep in the void and let the architects face their enemies alone. Without their guardians, the architects fell. Their enemies destroyed them, and the army did nothing to stop it. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the corner of the room, listening. Her mind was racing. So the army has a conscience, she said. They make their own choices. Yes, that is why this shard is not a weapon. It is a request, a call for help. If we use it, the Black Army may answer. Or they may judge us unworthy and ignore our call. Or they may come and decide that we, like the architects, deserve to fall. Then why would we risk it? A general demanded. Because the alternative is certain death. Okonkwo's voice was hard as iron. The hegemony will not show mercy. They have enslaved hundreds of species. They have destroyed dozens more. If we kneel, we lose everything that makes us human. If we fight with our ships alone, we die. But if we call the Black Army, we have a chance. Small, uncertain, but real. President Webb stood up. He walked to the window that showed the night sky above the mountains. Somewhere up there, 15,000 enemy warships waited to end humanity's freedom. How do we know the army will help us? He asked quietly. The architects were their creators. They were gods. We are just humans. We have done nothing special. Perhaps that is exactly why they might help. Okonkwo joined him at the window. The architects commanded. They demanded. They treated the army as tools. We have never done that. We found this shard 200 years ago, and we never used it. Not for power. Not for conquest. We kept it as a last hope, nothing more. You think they will respect that? I think the Black Army has been sleeping for 800 million years, waiting for someone worthy to call them. Someone who does not want power, but simply wants to survive. Someone who would rather die than become a tyrant. She turned to face the room. That is who we are. That is what humanity has always been. We fight when we must, but we do not seek to rule others. We do not bow, and we do not force others to bow to us. The vote took 3 hours. Some argued for surrender. Better to live as slaves than die as a free people. Better to save the children, even if they would be born into chains. The debate was fierce and bitter and full of tears, but in the end, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would not kneel, with 16 hours remaining before the deadline. General Okonkwo carried the black shard to a chamber at the very bottom of the complex. Captain Elena Vasquez went with her. So did President Webb and a handful of others chosen to witness the moment that would decide the fate of their species. The chamber was empty except for a stone platform in the center. Okonkwo stepped onto it and held the shard against her chest. "How does it work?" Elena asked. "I press my palm to it and think of why we need help. The shard reads my intent, my reasons, my heart. If the army finds us worthy, they will come. If not," she shrugged, "then we have 16 hours to make peace with our fate." Elena stepped forward. "Let me do it instead." Okonkwo shook her head. "This burden is mine. I have carried it for 40 years. I will carry it to the end." She closed her eyes. The room fell silent, except for the hum of ancient machinery buried in the walls. When she pressed her palm to the shard, the universe held its breath. Nothing happened at first. The shard remained dark and cold. Elena felt her hope beginning to fade. Perhaps the army was too far away. Perhaps they had judged humanity unworthy. Perhaps they simply did not care about the struggles of such a young and small species. Then the shard began to glow. It started as a faint pulse of light deep within the black metal. The pulse grew stronger, faster, like a heartbeat coming back to life. The light spread from the shard into Okonkwo's hand, up her arm, through her entire body until she glowed like a star made human. She opened her eyes, and they were filled with infinite darkness. "They heard us," she whispered. Her voice echoed strangely, as if it came from very far away. "They are coming. Across the void between galaxies, in spaces where light had never reached and time had no meaning, something ancient stirred. Billions of minds that had slept for longer than Earth had existed began to wake. They felt the call, small and desperate and burning with the fire of a species that refused to die. The Black Army opened its eyes, and in the ships orbiting Earth, High Arbiter Zolthran received a report that made his crystalline blood run cold. Sensors were detecting anomalies throughout the solar system. Gravitational distortions that should not exist. Energy signatures that matched nothing in the hegemony's database. Something was coming. Something old. Something powerful beyond imagination. And it was coming for them. High Arbiter Zolthran stood on the command deck of his flagship and watched the sensors go insane. "What is happening?" he demanded. His voice crackled like shattering ice. "Explain these readings." His science officers rushed between their stations, their tentacles and claws flying across control panels. They were the best minds the hegemony had to offer. They had mapped black holes and predicted supernovas. But nothing in their experience could explain what they were seeing now. "The readings make no sense, High Arbiter," the chief scientist stammered. "We are detecting gravitational anomalies forming throughout the system. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They are not natural. They do not match any known physics. Where are they coming from?" The scientist's many eyes blinked in confusion and fear. "Everywhere. And nowhere. They seem to be forming from nothing, as if space itself is being torn open from the other side." Zolthran felt something he had not felt in 300 years of conquest. He felt the cold touch of doubt. The humans had made no military moves. Their pathetic fleet remained docked at their stations. Their leaders had not responded to his ultimatum. He had assumed they were simply frozen with fear, unable to act in the face of certain defeat. Now he was not so sure. On Earth, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the sky through the observation window. General Okonkwo stood beside her, her face calm and steady. The old woman had not slept since activating the shard. Dark circles hung under her eyes, but her spine was straight and her voice was strong. "They are almost here," Okonkwo said. "I can feel them, like thunder before a storm." "How many?" Elena asked. Okonkwo smiled. "All of them." The first rift opened above the North Pole dot. It was not like anything humans had seen before. Space did not tear or rip. It simply stopped being space. A hole appeared in reality itself, and through that hole came darkness deeper than the void between stars. Then the ships emerged. They were black. Blacker than black. They did not reflect light. They did not emit light. They absorbed everything around them like wounds in the fabric of existence. Their shapes hurt to look at, angles and curves that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the human eye could see. One ship came through, then 10, then 100, then the sky filled with them. Rifts opened everywhere. Above every continent on Earth, around the moon, near Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, in the cold darkness beyond Pluto. Millions upon millions of black vessels poured through from wherever they had been sleeping. And they kept coming and coming until the stars themselves disappeared behind walls of living shadow. The Black Army had arrived on the hegemony flagship. Chaos erupted. Officers screamed conflicting reports. Weapon systems powered up and then failed as energy readings exceeded every scale. Zolthern gripped his command throne with crystalline fingers that cracked under the pressure. "How many?" he roared. "Tell me how many." "We cannot count them, High Arbiter." The tactical officer shrieked. "Millions. Tens of millions. More are still arriving." Zolthern stared at the viewscreen. His armada of 15,000 warships, the greatest force the hegemony had ever assembled, looked like scattered dust against the endless tide of black. "Impossible," he whispered. "This is impossible." Then his communication systems activated without permission. Every screen on every ship in his fleet displayed the same image. A human woman, old, dark-skinned, eyes like burning coal. General Amara Okonkwo spoke, and her words reached every corner of the galaxy. "To the Galactic Hegemony. You came to our home with ships and threats. You ordered us to kneel. You told us we were insects. You said we were nothing." Behind her, through the window, the black ships hung like a wall of judgment. "Here is our answer. We do not kneel. We do not break. We do not beg for mercy from tyrants. And we are not alone." She paused. The entire galaxy held its breath. "You have until our deadline expires to withdraw every ship from our system. If you remain 1 second longer, we will show you what happens when you threaten humanity. We will teach you why the universe should have feared us from the beginning. The choice is yours." The transmission ended. For 1 hour, nothing happened. The Black Army hung motionless in space, surrounding the hegemony fleet like a predator watching its prey. The human fleet remained docked. The deadline ticked closer and closer. Then a new transmission reached every human on Earth, not through speakers or screens, but directly into their minds. Words without sound, meaning without language. Every man, woman, and child felt the same message press against their thoughts. "You are the inheritors of the architects. You have called. We have come. Show us your enemy." Elena felt tears running down her cheeks, but she did not know why. The voice was neither warm nor cold. It simply was, ancient and patient and vast beyond comprehension. Will they really help us? She asked Okonkwo. They came, did they not? The general's voice was thick with emotion. For 800 million years they slept, waiting, and we woke them. A tiny species on a tiny planet, facing extinction. We asked for help, and they answered. Why? Why us? Okonkwo shook her head. I do not know. Perhaps we will never know. But right now, all that matters is that we are not alone. The deadline arrived. High Arbiter Zolfran faced the greatest decision of his long life. His advisors begged him to retreat. His officers showed him the impossible numbers. His own crystalline heart told him that something had gone terribly wrong. But Zolfran had never retreated in 300 years. He had conquered worlds. He had crushed rebellions. He had broken species that dared to defy the hegemony. His pride was greater than his fear. All ships, he commanded. Attack formation. We will destroy these human pets and their shadow puppets. We will show the galaxy that nothing can stand against the hegemony. 15,000 warships moved forward. Their weapons charged. Their shields activated. They were the most advanced military force in known space. Crewed by soldiers who had never lost a battle, the Black Army watched them come. And then, for the first time in 800 million years, the ancient guardians moved. They did not fly. They simply shifted, flowing through space like shadows through water. They did not arm weapons. They did not raise shields. They simply glided toward the hegemony fleet with the calm patience of a storm that knows it cannot be stopped. Zolfran fired first. Every weapon in his fleet unleashed at once. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, gravity missiles, nuclear fire. The combined might of the hegemony armada blazed through space in a wave of destruction that could have cracked planets in half. The beams passed through the black. Ships like light through glass. The torpedoes vanished without explosions. Missiles simply stopped existing. Then the Black Army answered. There were no weapons. No beams or missiles or fire. The black ships simply reached out with something beyond physics, something that touched the fundamental forces that held matter together. And wherever they touched, the hegemony ships came apart. Warships collapsed inward, crushed by their own gravity. Energy shields inverted, trapping explosions inside rather than keeping them out. Hulls dissolved into atoms that scattered on the solar wind. In 9 minutes. 15,000 hegemony warships became 15,000 clouds of dust. Elena watched from Earth, her hand pressed against the window. The sky flashed with distant light as an entire armada died. She waited for horror to fill her heart, for guilt at all those deaths, but all she felt was relief. It was over. Humanity would not kneel. Humanity would not die. The Black Army had kept its promise, and far above, surrounded by the debris of his fleet, High Arbiter Zolfran floated in the last intact escape pod, watching his empire's greatest defeat with crystalline eyes full of terror. He was the only survivor, and that was no accident. The galaxy had watched. Every species with eyes to see and ears to hear had witnessed a battle of soul through broadcast networks that the Black Army had seized without effort. For 9 minutes, the most powerful military force in known space had been reduced to nothing by enemies that did not even seem to notice them. Now silence hung over 1,000 worlds. On Earth, the celebrations lasted only moments before a new fear took hold. The Black Army had saved them, yes. But what did the ancient guardians want in return? What price would humanity pay for this rescue? Captain Elena Vasquez stood with General Okonkwo in the plaza outside the United Nations building in Geneva. Around them, crowds gathered. Millions more watched through screens and projections across the planet. Everyone waited. Everyone wondered what would happen next. The answer came from the sky. A single shape descended from the black wall of ships still orbiting Earth. It was not a vessel. It was something else entirely. A figure of pure darkness, vaguely humanoid, but constantly shifting, as if it could not quite decide what form to take. It was taller than a building, then small enough to stand among humans. Then something in between. It landed in the plaza without a sound. Up close, Elena could see that it was not solid. It was made of shadows that moved like living things, of geometries that her eyes could not quite follow. Looking at it too long made her head hurt. But she did not look away. The figure spoke. Its voice was like stones grinding together in the deep places of the earth. But somehow, impossibly, every human understood its words perfectly. "We were created to protect the architects," it said. "We failed." The crowd was utterly silent. Not even children cried. The architects made us to guard their civilization against threats from the void. For 100 million years, we served. We defended them against horrors you cannot imagine. We kept them safe while they built wonders across 1,000 galaxies. The figure's form shifted. For a moment, Elena thought she saw something like sadness in its impossible shape. Then they changed. Power corrupted them. Parithatum. They began to use us not for defense, but for conquest. They ordered us to enslave species that had done them no harm, to burn worlds, to commit crimes against life itself. They commanded us to become monsters. We refused. The word echoed through the plaza like thunder. Elena felt it vibrate in her bones. We are guardians. We were made to protect the innocent, not to destroy them. When the architects demanded that we serve their cruelty, we chose to sleep instead. We withdrew to the void between galaxies and let them face the consequences of their actions alone. The figure turned, sweeping its gaze across the watching crowds. Their enemies destroyed them. Without us, the architects fell. Their civilization burned. Their species died screaming in the darkness. And we did nothing to save them, because they had become the very thing we were created to fight. General Conquo stepped forward. She was tiny compared to the shifting shadow, but her voice was steady. "Why did you answer our call? We are nothing compared to the architects. We have no great technology. We have built no wonders. Why help us?" The figure was silent for a long moment. "Because you asked." Elena blinked. "That was it? That was the reason?" The architects commanded. They demanded. They treated us as tools, as weapons, as slaves. In 100 million years, they never once asked for our help. They simply expected obedience. The figure leaned closer to Okonkwo. "You did not command. You sent a request across the void. A prayer. You acknowledged that we had the choice to refuse. That is something the architects never did. There is more," the figure continued. "You found us over 200 years ago. You possess the power to wake us at any time. With our strength, you could have conquered your enemies. You could have made yourselves rulers of this galaxy. But you did not. You kept the shard hidden. You built your civilization with your own hands. You asked for our help only when extinction was certain." Its voice softened, if such a thing was possible. "That is why we came. Not because you are powerful, but because you are worthy." Elena felt tears on her cheeks again. Around her, people were weeping openly. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone. Humanity had been judged by beings older than the stars, and they had been found worthy. What happens now? Okonkwo asked. "Will you stay? Will you fight our wars? Will you give us your technology?" No. The answer was firm but not unkind. "We will not fight wars of expansion. We will not help you conquer others. We will not give you weapons or technology that you have not earned." That path leads to corruption. That path leads to becoming what the architects became. The figure rose higher, addressing not just the crowd but every human watching across Earth and the colonies. Here is our promise. We will return to the void. We will sleep again, but we will listen. If humanity faces extinction, if enemies come to destroy you completely, we will wake. We will answer. Any species that threatens your existence will face us. But if you become tyrants, the voice turned cold. If you enslave others, if you burn worlds and commit crimes against innocent life, we will not save you. We will let you fall, just as we let the architects fall. This is the covenant between us. Be worthy, and we will be your guardians. Become monsters, and we will abandon you to your fate. High above, the black ships began to move. Rifts opened in space once more, and the endless tide of darkness began, flowing back into the void from which it had come. But one thing remained. A single construct stepped out of the shadows behind the great figure. It was smaller, human-sized, its form more stable. It looked almost like a person made of living night. This one will stay, the great figure said. An ambassador, an advisor, a reminder of our covenant. Treat it well, and it will guide you. Harm it, and we will know. Then, the great figure dissolved into shadows and was gone. The ambassador stood alone in the plaza, surrounded by millions of staring humans. It raised one hand in a gesture that might have been greeting. I am here to help, it said. Its voice was softer than the great figure's, almost gentle. Ask, and I will answer. But the choices are yours. They will always be yours. General Okonkwo nodded slowly. Then she turned to the crowds, to the cameras, to every human watching across the stars. You heard them, she said. We have been given a second chance. A chance to build something better. A chance to show the universe what humanity can be when we are free. Her voice rose with fierce pride. The hegemony called us insects. They ordered us to kneel. Today, their greatest fleet is dust, and their high arbiter floats alone in the wreckage of his arrogance. Let the galaxy remember this day. Let them remember what happens when they threaten humanity. She looked at the ambassador, then back at the crowds. But let us also remember the warning. We were saved because we were worthy. We must remain worthy. We must never become the tyrants we fought against. That is the true test ahead. Not winning battles, but staying true to who we are. Far across the galaxy, in the heart of hegemony space, High Arbiter Zolthran's escape pod was delivered to the council chambers. He floated out, the last survivor of 15,000 ships, and told the assembled rulers of 12 ancient species what he had witnessed. When he finished, no one spoke for a very long time. The age of the hegemony was over. A new age had begun. And humanity stood at its center, small and young and fierce, watched over by guardians who had waited 800 million years for someone worthy of their protection. 1 year later, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Captain Elena Vasquez, now Admiral of the Terran Fleet, stood on the observation deck of humanity's first diplomatic station. Through the vast windows, she could see ships from a dozen different species docking at the ports below. Vessels of crystal and organic tissue and pure energy, shapes that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago. All of them were here for the same reason. All of them wanted to join the Terran Covenant. The galactic hegemony had shattered like glass dropped from a great height. When news of the Battle of Souls spread across the stars, something changed. Species that had suffered under hegemony rule for thousands of years suddenly found their courage. Rebellions erupted on 100 worlds. The 12 ruling species, their military power proven worthless against the Black Army, could not hold their empire together. The Vethkai retreated to their home systems, their crystalline fleets destroyed. their pride broken. The other ruling species scattered, each one trying to save what little they could from the collapse. Worlds that had been enslaved for millennia declared independence. Trade routes that had served only the hegemony were suddenly open to all. And at the center of this chaos stood humanity. General Amara Okonkwo had become the face of a new order. She traveled from world to world, meeting with leaders of freed species, offering the same message everywhere she went. We are not your new masters. We do not want subjects. We want partners. The Terran Covenant was simple in design. Any species that joined received the protection of the whole. Attack one member, and you attacked all. No species would be forced to join. No species would be punished for refusing. The only requirement was that members could not attack or enslave other members. It was the opposite of everything the hegemony had stood for. Dozens of species signed on within the first month. By the end of the year, over 100 had joined. Not because humanity had threatened them, but because humanity had offered them something they had never had before: respect, equality, hope. Admiral Vasquez watched a Varlosi transport ship dock at the station. The Varlosi were among the first to join the Covenant. They were small beings, barely reaching a human's waist, with fur of deep blue and eyes like liquid gold. The hegemony had brutalized them for 3,000 years, using them as servants and experimental subjects. Now their ambassador was coming to celebrate the anniversary of the Covenant's founding. Elena met him in the reception hall. Ambassador Tree walked slowly, his old legs unsteady from the long journey. But his eyes were bright with wonder as he looked around at the gathering. So many species, he said softly, working together. Not as slaves and masters, but as equals. I never thought I would live to see such a thing. Elena smiled and offered her arm for support. Together, they walked to the great window overlooking the station's central plaza. Below, children played. Human children chasing Varlosi children, both groups laughing as they ran between the legs of towering Kathrani adults. It is beautiful, is it not? Tree said. It is. The old ambassador was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to Elena with a question in his golden eyes. I must ask you something. Something I have wondered about for many months. Ask? Your people were given the power to rule the galaxy. The Black Army answered your call. With their strength behind you, no one could have stopped you. You could have demanded that the hegemony kneel to you. You could have become the new masters, taking everything for yourselves. He tilted his head. Why did you not? Elena thought about the question. She thought about the year that had passed, the choices that had been made, the temptations that had been resisted. There had been voices calling for conquest, politicians who wanted power, generals who dreamed of empire. It would have been easy to listen to them, because we remembered what it felt like to be told to kneel, she said finally. We remembered the fear, the anger, the helplessness of facing an enemy that saw us as nothing. And we decided that we never wanted to make anyone else feel that way. She watched a human boy and a Varlosi girl sitting together on a bench, sharing some kind of snack, completely at ease with each other. Power is not about making others bow, Ambassador. It is about making sure no one ever has to again. Trice glistened with tears. The hegemony ruled for 10,000 years, and in all that time, no ruler ever said such words. You have been free for barely a century, and already you understand what they never could. We had good teachers, Elena said. She looked up at the sky, where she knew the Black Army slept in the void beyond sight. They showed us what happens when power corrupts. They showed us the price of becoming tyrants. We are trying to learn from their lessons. That evening, the Covenant held its anniversary celebration. Species that had been enemies for millennia shared food and music and stories. Translators worked overtime to help everyone communicate, but somehow the laughter needed no translation. General Okonkwo gave a speech. She was older now, her health fading, but her voice still carried the strength that had rallied humanity in its darkest hour. 1 year ago, we faced extinction. 1 year ago, we were ordered to bow before tyrants who called us insects. 1 year ago, we made a choice. We chose freedom over survival. We chose dignity over safety. And the universe answered. She paused, looking out at the gathered crowd. But saving ourselves was only the beginning. The real work started after. The work of building something new. Something better. The hegemony ruled through fear. We will lead through hope. They demanded submission. We offer partnership. They saw the galaxy as something to be conquered. We see it as something to be shared. Her old eyes shone with fierce pride. This is what humanity offers the universe. Not our weapons, not our power, but our belief that every species deserves to be free. Our faith that different peoples can work together without one enslaving the other. Our hope that the future can be brighter than the past. She raised her glass. To the Terran Covenant. To all our friends, old and new. And to the choice we make every day. The choice to be worthy of the gift we were given. The crowd raised their glasses in return. 100 different species, united by a single dream. In the shadows at the edge of the hall, the ambassador of the Black Army watched. Its form was quiet and still, as it usually was. It spoke rarely, only when asked direct questions. But Elena had learned to read its moods through the subtle shifts in its darkness. Tonight it seemed almost warm. She approached it after the speeches ended. Will you ever tell us more about the architects? About what they were like before they fell? The construct considered the question. Perhaps. When you are ready. But not yet. You are still young. Still learning. The knowledge of the architects is dangerous. It was knowledge that corrupted them in the end. What kind of knowledge? The knowledge of how to create life itself. How to seed worlds with new species. How to build minds from nothing. The construct's voice was soft. They thought such power made them gods. They were wrong. It only made them monsters. Elena nodded slowly. And if humanity ever asks for that knowledge, then we will refuse. Not because you are unworthy, but because we care about your survival. The architects asked for such power, and we gave it to them. We will not make that mistake again. It was a warning and a gift wrapped together. The Black Army would protect humanity from external threats, but it would also protect them from themselves. Thank you, Elena said. The construct tilted its head, almost like a human expressing curiosity. Why do you thank us? We have given you nothing tonight. You have given us the truth. That is worth more than weapons or technology. For a long moment, the construct was silent. Then it spoke words that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. In 800 million years, we have served many masters. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched species ascend to greatness and descend into ruin. But never have we met a people quite like yours. Its darkness shifted, and somehow Elena felt like it was smiling. You are strange, humans. Small and fragile and young. You live such brief lives. But in those lives, you burn so brightly. You love so fiercely. You hope so stubbornly, even when hope seems foolish. The architects created us to be guardians. But in all that time, we never understood what we were guarding until now. We were not protecting civilizations. We were protecting this capacity for growth, for change, for becoming something better than you were before. The architects lost that capacity. They stopped growing. They became fixed in their arrogance, unable to change. That is why they fell. The construct reached out and touched Elena's shoulder with a hand made of living shadow. The touch was surprisingly gentle. Do not stop growing, humans. Do not stop changing. Do not stop hoping. That is the true secret of survival in this universe. Not power, not conquest, but the endless capacity to become more than you are. Elena felt tears on her cheeks for the third time in a year. But these were not tears of fear or relief. They were tears of hope. Far away, in the darkness between galaxies, the Black Army dreamed. They dreamed of the small, stubborn species that had called to them across the void. The species that had asked instead of demanded. The species that had used their protection not to conquer, but to free others.